I was talking to a friend yesterday about near-death experiences, and I'll tell you about my closest adventure with death in a second. But the reason we got onto it is because naturally we talked about running, we talked about adventure, and we talked about going into the big mountains, whether it's kind of the Pyrenees, the Alps, or whether it's the Himalayas. And the reason we got onto the conversation was because we talked about people, like people from here, corporate type people who want to go and kind of check off a bucket list in events like UTMB and in Marathon des Sables and climbing the big mountains like Everest and Annapurna and things like that. And we were talking about that, and he kind of agreed with it. I kind of didn't, and saw it as a risk to not just themselves but people around them. And I have quite strong opinions on that. Anyway, it got me onto my story, which really contradicted what I've just said, because essentially I put myself in danger, and that could have led to a rescue attempt, which would have put other people in danger. Nobody came to save me, but I'll tell you about it now. So I went to the Himalayas for the first time in 2013. I landed, I remember getting a 100-day visa and just thinking, right, I'm gonna go from Kathmandu. I think I spent 5 days in Kathmandu, and it just was, after 4 or 5 days, it was just too crazy. So I got on this 7-hour bus to, it cost me $5, got on a 7-hour bus to across the mountain ranges to Pokhara. Pokhara is absolutely beautiful. It's like a smaller city with on the kind of brink of or on the edge of a lake with like different pagodas at either side, but it's literally on the edge of the Annapurna conservation area. So my idea was to get a hotel and then just to trek into the Annapurnas all the time. And you can go into the Annapurnas from there with a 30-minute bus. Start from Dampus, I think it is, or something close to Dampus. There's a bridge, you check in with your stamp. It was back then $40. And then you can be in the Annapurna conservation area for as long as you want. So I was just going in there, running, walking, hiking, and just traveling really light, and then sleeping at these little tea houses, which if you eat there, it costs you $1, or it did back then, it cost you $1 to stay overnight. Very simple, hostel type environment, but you're meeting people which are pretty like-minded, or they're from different places. Really interesting, fascinating. But after one of these tours, I came down and I was sat in a cafe reading a book by Moritz Herzog, The First Ascent of Annapurna, which is a disaster, another disaster, like a success, but a disaster along the way. A lot of people died and lost fingers, legs, etc. But it was a success in terms of, like, they scaled it and it was the first ascent. I was reading this book, and I remember this Australian girl said to me from across the room, like, "Are you doing the race, mate?" And I was like, "What race, and how do you know kind of I'm a runner?" And she'd spotted my trail running shoes, and we started to talk, and this was Thursday, and there was a race starting, a 100K race on the Saturday. And so I tried the next day to try to get an entrance, and she said it was like a package deal, like, you know, much like I've just been speaking about. You pay your $3,000, $5,000, they're gonna put you in a hotel, feed you, take a bus, put you in taxis, etc., and you've got the event race. So I managed to persuade the race director that I'd get involved for a couple of $100, I think it was. It was high, but it wasn't as high as what everybody else had paid. So I felt as if I got a good deal. And then it was about 100 expats or foreigners and about 100 Nepalese people who are ridiculously strong, ridiculously strong on the farms, ridiculously strong in terms of the porters and Sherpas, but in terms of athletes as well, like, they're absolutely massive. And I know they've started to come across to different races, but there's not yet the major money in trail running for them to do really well. Anyway, managed to start this race, and I was underprepared because I wasn't ready to do this race. And so they said yes on the Friday. I went to local shops. I was trying to find energy gels and things like that. It was a sunny day, but it was the Himalayas, and I set off with a vest, a running vest, running shorts, like short shorts, trail running shoes, a Casio watch, because I hadn't kind of got a Garmin or anything like that by then, or hadn't taken it with me. And I'd got a pouch that was carrying like passport and stuff like that regularly, but I'd turned that into some kind of bum bag, and that had a load of sesame seed bars in it that I was going to use as energy gels. And then I had a bottle of water. That was it for the race. And I knew that there was checkpoints every kind of 10 to 15K, and along the way it'd be okay. But the list of kind of safety equipment, jackets and the cover, the blanket that protects you, survival blanket, none of that I had, and I didn't think I needed it because it was such a nice day. I want to say it was about March or April. Try and find the results and post the results in the description. But anyway, I started this race and it was going great, and I didn't know where I was because the race was meant to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. This is Nepal for you, yeah? The race was meant to start at 7 o'clock and breakfast was meant to be 6 o'clock. Got up for breakfast, nothing was ready. They said everything's postponed an hour. The breakfast and the start of the race is postponed an hour. So we were expecting to start the race at 8 o'clock. Some of us started to get hungry, so in our camp, we started to eat, and then all of a sudden we heard this gunshot and 185 runners, less the 15 runners that were in my camp, all ran past. So we quickly got ready, ran back to the rooms, put our kit on, and then just ran after this motorbike that then took us the wrong way. And eventually we kind of got in with the race. But what had happened in that situation is I'd found out the day before that Lizzie Hawker was running, and I knew that she was a great trail runner, and she had done lots of stuff in the Himalayas, lots of fastest known times and stuff like that. I just thought, I'm going to sit with Lizzie Hawker for as long as possible and learn as much as I could. This was in 2013, it's 10 years ago. So I couldn't catch up to Lizzie Hawker until, I can't remember exactly the point, but I started to catch people after maybe 10 kilometers, and then started to go through the field. And then at 66 kilometers, I had no clue where I was in the race. So I didn't know whether I was racing or just trying to survive. 66 kilometers exactly, the heavens opened and it started to pour ice cold Himalayan rain. Then I realized like why I needed the jacket, the blanket, etc., etc. And it was cold. And at first it was quite refreshing. And because it was, you know, obviously by that point I'd run 66K, I was pretty hot, I was sort of eating stuff along the way, I was drinking, but this was like a nice change for the first sort of 5 kilometers. And then everything changed. So like the surface of the ground becomes stickier, it's muddier. I think it got to 75K, 80K, and all of a sudden there was a switchback. So I felt that I was close to the finish. I was coming towards like 20K, 25K to the finish. The race ended up to be 119K, and then up this switchback that was, I think, 15 to 20K, a lot of Nepalese guys were just going straight the way up and not taking the switchback on the road. But the road, for me, felt safe because there was no there was landslides, but they obviously weren't happening on the road. And I felt that I may be safer if I stayed on the road. Anyway, that's what I did. But then there was 3 or 4 thunderstorms along the way. And it got to a point that I was so cold. And the big thing as well, that once the rain came, all the checkpoint people, all the volunteers just went home. So there was no drinks, there was no food, there was nothing after 66 kilometers. And so you get to a checkpoint, you go to sign your name to, you know, to prove where you were, check where you were in the race. I think at some point I found out I was 5th or 6th, which it was a surprise to me. But there was no food, and then the next checkpoint, everybody had gone. And I got to a point which was apparently 7 kilometers away from the finish, and it was just 7 kilometers uphill. We'd actually driven it on a bus the day before, so I knew how steep it was, and I knew it was kind of a power hike all the way to the top. So I thought to myself it was going to be about 2 hours. It ended up being maybe 4 hours because it was literally a river running down towards me. And then it went dark, which I felt 100K, it's not going to take me more than 9-10 hours. It ended up taking me 13 hours and a half or whatever it was. And so it went to dark, and because of the clouds and rain, there was no moonlight, so it was completely pitch black. And I had no torch, no kind of vision in front, so I was literally kind of checking my steps in front of me. Really, really, really dodgy, to the point where I was absolutely exhausted, I'd run out of food, had no water left, and I just thought, I'm just going to lie down here and have a rest, and then hopefully it kind of brightens up or whatever. I don't know what I was thinking. I'd started to like lose my mind a little bit, and there was one point where I was about to go. I was going up this trail, and I remember it so clearly because all of a sudden there was a flash of lightning, and it would show me the path in front. And that flash of lightning literally showed me a big gap in the road where there'd been a landslide. So the Jeep track trail, and we passed it the next day on the way down, and we all had to get out because it was so dangerous, that part of the road has fallen away. So I was just about to tread onto a part that I would have fell, and an absolute nightmare. And even with 2-3K to go, very close to home, I was shouting if there was anybody there to help who'd already finished one of the shorter races. I think there was a 50K and a 70K as well the same day. So some of the people would have been there. But eventually I got to the finish line. Some people, my friend from Malaysia, my friend from India met me at the end, and they gave me some pasta and stuff that was still left over. People were pissed off, really, really annoyed. And I know Lizzie was really annoyed at the organization. And for me, it was like, yeah, I'm freezing cold. I'm close to hypothermic, but everybody else out there, even if they've got the kit, they need help. And so, why am I telling you this? I guess I'm telling you this because it's definitely the closest I've ever come to death. And I've probably not quite described it properly there, but there was many points where I thought I'm just going to have to cool down and try to keep warm, because I'm not winning right now, and I feel as if I'm moving forward so slow that I'm never going to reach the end. And so the safety list is important because you don't know what's going to happen. The safety list is important. It's important to be ready and be ready for any types of conditions, whether you're kind of, you know, you may be so close to a town, you may be literally 3-4 kilometers from a town, but if people cannot see you and it's pitch black and you don't have a light, you are completely invisible. This is why jackets, mountain jackets, are like bright yellow or bright red or stuff, yeah, because people need to be seen if they're in trouble. And so for me, it's like going back to the Himalayas in, you know, Everest 96 disaster, when those groups from South Africa, from America were competing to try to get as many people as they could, and they were making false promises to say that we can put you on top if you have a, you know, if you're able-bodied, we can get you on top of the mountain. You cannot make guarantees like that, and it's very, very dangerous. And what it means is it gives people a false sense of security, along with the supplemental oxygen, which I'm dead against as well, unless it's an emergency. And you get a recipe for disaster, which is exactly what happened in '96. You get teams like Mountain Madness, and I forgot what Rob Hill's group was called, and the South Africans, like not joining up as team, not sharing, etc. And there's too many people on the mountain, so you're waiting for a long time, and then you put yourself in a situation where not only you're in danger, but everybody else around you that feels responsible for your safety because they're there with you is also put in danger. And I cannot be in those situations. And I guess that's the part of me that won't allow me to go even cycling with other groups, because there's something about kind of group mentality, whether it's kind of on the bike or whether it's, you know, trekking out there, that you are responsible for other people's safety and they're responsible for you. And there's a few times when I've been out cycling where I've just felt I'm letting people down here. People are waiting for me, even if it's a couple of punches or it's a mechanical of some kind. I don't like people waiting for me. So I guess that all comes down to it. But yeah, that's a little story of my closest experience with death. And yeah, it was fun to remember that yesterday, but you know, I'll never forget it either.